Welcome, everybody, to the Thursday live show with special guest Tyrone Morales. Thanks, Tyrone, for being here. How you doing, man?
Thanks for having me, Graham. I'm doing great, man. Just winding down for the evening.
Awesome, bro. Is that a
How are you
real? Is
doing?
that the real sunset behind you there, or is it a
Oh,
painting?
that's actually a light that I set. Intentionally, it looks like the sunset, so it's a
Uh,
reflection.
oh, it's a reflection. Okay, dope. Awesome, man. Well, I'm excited to chat with you today. We got a bunch of topics we want to talk about, but I want to kind of pose a question to the audience to start this off, which is, how do you be rebellious to that which insults your soul, but then surrender to that which gives it support, life, purpose? That's something that Tyrone, you had mentioned to me the other day in our conversation, something that really inspired you, and about how you have, been looking at that rebellious nature, and also the opposite of that is to surrender to the inner path, the inner journey, God's plan for your life. So I want to chat with you about that. Also about your trip to Italy recently, where you did a Tantra course, and also the Jesus diet. So we got lots of topics to cover, but I want to start with Italy. Let's start with
Yeah,
Italy and your trip there. What was that all about? Why'd you decide to go? And that is kind of rebellious in its sense, because for some people, Tantra is kind of like out there. So take us on the journey of going to Italy to learn Tantra, and what was that all about for you?
absolutely. Well, if anyone, watching right now experiences that in their life where they have, cycles where they end up feeling like a call to adventure, something that, takes them outside of their comfort zone. We go through these natural evolutions. We could call them initiations in life. And, my girlfriend Shelby at the time had been looking at this retreat that's hosted by these two Tantra practitioners. And, it fell through the last 2, 3 years for her. And then she was like, I think this is the year. How, like, I've been wanting to go to Italy. We call it her Eat, Pray, Love trip because in Eat, Pray, Love, there's the scene about like going to Italy and everything. So this was kind of like her Eat, Pray, Love trip for her, at least. And for me, it was a call to a whole nother way of being. And what came up for me was a lot of things around finances. In the past, I've had a lot of trips where I've felt uncomfortable with, making that investment, taking the leap, and is this really for me? Even for Shelby and I, we had a time where we're exploring these, we could call them, Eastern ideas in a sense. And we both have this Christian background and, growing through our own faith. So to step into this space of like Tantra training, it was like, okay, like God seems to keep pointing us in this direction of going to this retreat. I prayed about it for, months of like, God, if you want me to go to this, make it abundantly clear. And if you don't, like, make sure it does not happen. And a few days after saying that prayer, I just had this influx of money coming in. People were sending me money for whatever reason, and I was like, "Okay, God, like it seems like you're pretty clear." And I had my resistance, but we both ended up taking the leap and made it to Italy for 30 days to do our tantra yoga training. And yeah, I mean, it was transformative, just the act alone of actually going to Italy. So for me, that was like the biggest part of the transformation. Letting go of that survival mindset and
Mm,
stepping into a more abundant version of myself that could experience life not through, pain and struggle, but pleasure. And
mm.
ironically enough, tantra, a lot of people, what do you people think of when I say, tantra? For a lot of people, it's like, oh, sex, and
Yeah.
this topic of like people having, sex at these places. But these two practitioners, the reason Shelby loved them was because they really honor the actual tradition of tantra, which is to harmonize the polar opposites within us, the masculine and feminine pole, and to bring those into harmony. So you do that through, different yoga techniques, and different breathing patterns and different practices. And yeah, we took it with a grain of salt. A lot of the trainings took what resonated, took what didn't. But I thought it was admirable that my girlfriend there, when we were first introducing ourselves at the retreat, she, we say a little bit about ourselves and whatnot, and she's like, she started with like, yeah, I'm a follower of Jesus, and it's a bit uncomfortable for me here, but I felt the call. So both of us, the Italy retreat was all about accepting that call to adventure and stepping into those uncomfortable parts of ourselves and listening, based on your question, like deepening
Yeah.
listening to that resonance of soul.
Yeah.
So
Beautiful,
that was,
dude. Now that you've come back, obviously you've had some time to integrate this. What have been the takeaways or what differences have you noticed in your own life? And have you now begun teaching this, or what's the next step for you in this sort of adventure of Tantra?
yeah, one of the biggest shifts for me was bringing more consciousness to um, my offerings when I first begin. Whether I'm teaching a breathwork class, whether I'm just starting my day off, or I'm about to do something. The idea of and the practice of consecration. Yeah, a lot of people hear the consecration through like the Catholic religion of like, oh, we're gonna do like a Mary consecration. The practice of a consecration for us was, before we gave like a lecture, we would start the lecture. Kind of, it actually reminded me of our wellness retreat that you and I did at the Saskatoon farm, where you're like, hey man, let's go outside and pray before we do this. And so we were like, God, like, whatever comes from the fruits of this conversation, just let, the words that come out of our mouth, let the people tuning in, let it be of service to your will, God, and for the greater good of all. And, bringing that consciousness to the things that I do, um, and the aspect of devotion. There's something in Tantra called brahmacharya. And so brahmacharya is essentially, for us guys, a lot of people might have heard of something like the no fap, where a guy abstains from certain sexual things, and so um, yeah, we had that challenge of 30 days of no ejaculation. So for guys, it would the idea is that you can have an orgasm without ejaculation. And so, yeah, you retain your seed as a man, and retain that sexual energy, which is that creative energy. So, um, there is also the aspect of discipline to go with that. So that's something that I've already had been integrating into my life. So it was cool to step into a space where that was like really honored, and you could bring a lot more conscious attention to it. So have you ever done anything like that, like a 30
Yeah.
day, like just
Yeah. Yeah, I have done that, and I've heard about it before. I think maybe we've had that conversation before. It's kinda like you see it in a lot of, like, Instagram accounts for men, um, about that understanding of that, so that you're very conscious with that, and, Kim Anami actually is a woman. Do you know Kim Anami's work?
yes,
Yeah.
Shelby's my girlfriend. Yeah, she's taken her course.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, so I've done 2 of her courses now, and she talks about that, and like you said, d to in the sexual union, being able to come together but not orgasm for a man is like, for most men, it's kind of like, what are you talking about? Like, how would that be possible?
yeah,
But yeah, it's something that I have practiced and been able to do, and it's a beautiful experience to move that energy through the body, and it's something that I didn't know was possible because it's not sort of mainstream. It's you wouldn't read about that normally at school or anything. At least I didn't hear about that at school in sex ed or anything like that. You never see it in movies. It's never talked about in films or stories or anything like that. So it was only through Kim Kiminami that I had learned about that, and then also the retention of the male seed and the energy of that. I have a friend who talked about that a lot and the differences it made in his life. And it's not like, you don't enjoy yourself or you don't make babies, but it's just being very conscious, from my understanding, of because it's a lot of energy and resources that your body is, producing when you do that. So to retain that, like you said, I think energetically, but also physically, you can hold that energy and learn how to hold that energy, which I think is fantastic. So that's kind of what you guys were doing in the tantra class. Then, did you talk a lot about that and the benefits of that?
yeah, absolutely. Especially for men, being able to hold hold that seat, is not only beneficial for your partner, but for the people in your life. You can show up with the energy that, um, your body would generally spend producing,
Yeah, to
and
make a baby. Yeah, you're like holding that in instead.
yeah,
Yeah.
channel that into other creative things, and I also have like that biblical resonance as well. Growing up reading scripture, and the one verse about like the flesh is weak as well, and the ability to say no to your flesh, and really listen in to your soul. I think that's like one of the most important aspects that really came up for me as well. So
Yeah, cool, man. Awesome. And do you have to my part two of my question, are you now teaching this, or is this just more sort of a general sort of thing in all your offerings that you're bringing the lessons into?
yeah, the teachers there, they were very adamant about us like honoring like the original tradition of tantra, because a lot of what you see in tantra in the world is actually what they would call neo tantra, which is a lot of
Hmm,
distorted teachings that just pick and choose what they want from it. So I've been very particular about actually offering it in a space where I can also honor the teachers of that space and the tradition itself. So for me, it's been predominantly a practice,
okay.
integrating those things, and that follows my natural rhythm of like wanting to actually embody something before I teach it. So.
Yeah, yeah, smart.
Uh, so I'm
Yeah,
more in the stage of integrating the teachings and like really, being able to see how that shows up in my life and then be able to offer that to other people. So
cool. If somebody is interested in what we've been talking about recently now, are there a website or books or things that you have been given through this course that you can point people towards if they're like, hey, I want to learn more about what you just shared and I want to kind of tap into it? Obviously, like you said, there's a lot of new age tantra stuff, maybe the distortions. What did you learn from your course and your teachers there about the best sources to go to for this material if people want to learn more?
yeah, we were very particular about that. My girlfriend, she actually brought like a lot of material to the teachers and being like, "Hey, is this authentic tantra?" And so, a lot of it is not out there. So, the one that we went to is called Om Tantra, and yeah, I would say like the best book to get started, and one of the ones that I know came up a lot during our training there was actually it's by Mantak Chia, and that was about your sexual energy and some techniques that come with it. And I think it's a good starting point for a lot of people of being like, oh, like I can actually cultivate this. I find that comes up with a lot of men where it's like, what do I do with all this energy? I don't have any tools to do it.
Yeah.
Even like the modern day um like no fap thing where like guys are abstaining, a lot of them are like, "Hey, like, I'm still having trouble with this, and I don't know what to do with
Yeah.
this extra energy." So the Mantak Chia is a really good
No,
resource
thank
to
you.
get started with.
Perfect. Thanks, Tyrone. And I'll try to include that in the show notes or a link below this video when we post the replay there. Um, Thanks, dude, for that. Let's jump to now the sort of theme of this overall conversation, which is the rebellious, the rebel, the rebellious nature, and then also the surrender to God's plan, your soul's purpose, the divine path. You mentioned a story or something you saw online and how it interacted with you and how it impacted you, and you shared that. So, can you take us through what you understood about this concept and how it sort of translated into your own life?
Yeah. The post I saw was on Instagram. It was by a guy called Xavier Dagba. Um, he has a program called like the Enheartened Way, and it's about bridging the gap between heaven and earth, and how us as people can integrate, both like our light and our shadow, essentially. And so naturally, what flows out of his work is a lot of paradox. So his post was a very paradoxical one. It said, uh, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was, the most rebellious people are like ironically the most obedient, and they're rebellious to the things that cloud our soul. They're rebellious to the things that take us away from listening deeply within, and most obedient to that inner truth. And the reason it's stuck out to me so much is because I actually have a printed version of this Rumi poem that's called "The Husking Core of Masculinity," and it says, masculinity has a husk of anger, greed, rage, and then it has a core of clarity as well. And in it, he says, "Remember Ayaz crushing the king's pearl." When you hear that truth and that nobility within, that is the only thing that you respond to. And I totally paraphrase that whole poem, so people can go look it up after. But but the idea is, you're listening to that nobility within, that truth within, and attuning yourself to that through obedience. And simultaneously, you're rebelling against all that programming that we grew up with from our culture. Um, all the things that we heard from other people in our lives that told us who we really are, that told us not to shine our light too much. So a lot of what came up for me was like, oh, okay, like I, I want to develop a deeper sense of listening deeper to that truth and being obedient to it, especially in the age of distraction that we're in right now. I think it's one of the most important things for us to truly listen deeply in.
Yeah, amen, dude. What I loved about this was, a lot of people talk about, or I've seen on two ends of the spectrum. You have people that are really rebellious and like, fighting the system, angry at the government, it's a politician or whoever, injustices, but yet they are not in complete surrender to that inner world. Or you have people, or the inner path, the soul, and what God put you here to do. Or you have people that are, deeply spiritual, but yet they go along and they're not necessarily rebellious towards the things that are insulting their soul. They're just like, oh, it's all love and it's all okay. Like everything will be fine. It's like, yeah, but there's that equal, like you said, paradoxical almost, two energies of like being rebellious to that which is insulting and uh attacking of the human spirit and the beauty of life, and the individual soul there. And
Yeah.
then also in complete surrender and obedience to God, or obedience to God's plan. So both at the same time. When you said that, I was like, oh, that's so good, because I've oscillated between the two, but to hold both of those at the same time, I think is a very powerful place to be. So that's why I wanted to dive into it with you. So for you, Tyrone, in your rebellious nature, what have you felt, you've learned about your rebellious nature and how to channel that energy, like we were talking yesterday about like channeling it, and then also how to move that into your obedience to your inner path. Like how have you balanced those two in your life personally?
Yeah, I think a big part of it is my internet okay as well. Does
It's
it
okay for
fit?
my end, but it says that your internet connection is it's choppy, but for me it's okay. So
Okay. I better plug in my phone here. I'll reset up here.
okay.
Uh, so yeah, in terms of integrating um, that like channeling that energy, I think a big part of it is reconciling like my own, what we could call like our shadow, the ways that we self sabotage ourselves. And so, like, a big part of that for me was getting honest with myself, of being like, okay, like, where am I actually rebelling against my soul? It shows
Mm,
up in that moment. I'm sure anyone can relate. Before you go to bed, it's like, or when you first wake up, it's like, are you reaching for the phone, or are you reaching for your Bible, or some poetry, something to inspire you? um, are you sitting down to meditate, or are you distracting yourself? So one of the practices that I love is the fast. So when we're fasting, one of our most primal desires is food. It's like, okay, it's time to eat. I'm really hungry. And so if you can see the ways that you are like telling yourself, you're like, well, maybe it's okay if I break the fast right now. Maybe it's okay. What's one little, chocolate going to do to the fast there? And so, learning to hear that voice and be like, okay, that's not that inner nobility. That's not like, the voice that I want to be obeying right now. But it's tricky sometimes. So being able to recognize that voice of being like, pick up your phone versus like that deep silence that is just inviting you into deeper presence and not necessarily always in words. I think being able to distinguish between those two is one of the practices that has really helped me to channel that energy. And so fasting is one of the best ways to do that because that voice gets pretty active when your body wants some food. So
Well, that's a good segue or transition then to one of the other things I wanted to talk with you about, which is the diet that you're on. You called it the Jesus diet. I haven't heard a lot about it, although I have heard Aaron Ackby, I think is how you pronounce his last name.
yeah,
He mentioned it, and I also watched. Did you watch Christspiracy, his friend's documentary film?
no, not yet. That's a good
Okay,
one.
so check out Christspiracy. It's basically it's like a biblical version of a vegan documentary where they're talking about eating animals and how I think his name's Kip is the documentary filmmaker's name. He kind of looks at uh, scripture and Jesus's actions, and sort of through his perspective is saying that Jesus was actually protesting a lot of the animal sacrifice, and that
Mm,
this is so he has all these. It's an interesting documentary. Anyways,
yeah.
but I believe him, Kip, the director of the Christspiracy film, and Aaron Ackby are on this Jesus diet, which is where you heard of it. So tell me what you know about it, how it's been for you, and what is it exactly?
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer some of the comments in there, Danny was asking how long I fasted as well. Usually do the intermittent fasting, and also a Daniel fast as well. I've done before as well. People can look that one up. But generally, like if I'm doing a fast, it's like a good 3-day water fast. So, but back to what you were asking about. Yeah, that's where I first heard the Jesus fast was through the Aaron Apke. Um, and you know, it was one of those things that kept coming up for me. I was like, I've done the vegan thing before, and my body felt like really weak off of it. And um, after a certain amount of time, I got back into like eating meat, and my body was responding pretty well to it. I felt a lot more like nourished and simultaneously grounded, like more in my body. But as of recently, I just had so many synchronicities around people being like, "Oh, I'm going vegetarian," and then, um, I felt this pull that to listen to more of his Jesus diet podcast. And when I was feeling that pull, I was working at the health food store, and there's a lady that came in with her daughter, and her daughter was like, Yeshua. I had the hair down and everything, so maybe there was something there. But her and I got talking, and she's writing a book about Jesus right now. And I was like, oh, like cool. Like I want to learn more about your book and whatnot. So, I started feeling these little droplets of like Jesus diet into my awareness. And a couple days later, I'm driving out to get some spring water. I toss on the podcast. I'm like, okay, I'll actually like learn what this is about. And as you were saying, it's very much like close to like a vegan style diet. So after listening to that podcast, I'm driving and I feel this pull to go into the shopping place, Winners, to get some clothes. And I run into her again. And, she starts telling me again about how she has a whole section about the Jesus diet. And she hasn't even listened or heard of Aaron Apke or the Jesus diet. So, I was like, all right, God, like I'm feeling some promptings. I'll give it a try. So, yeah, for the last 11 days, I've been, abstaining from animal products. I haven't been completely perfect with it, but I've been testing it out pretty fully, I would say. So, and from my understanding, yeah, a lot of it is like bringing up the idea that the industrial complex that we've created around the food industry just does not honor the relationship that we have with animals. And, I just finished editing a video about cacao, chocolate, and it was very, very similar findings. Industrial and mass produced chocolate does not have the same benefits as like really like well handcrafted dark chocolate. Like you're going to get so many more benefits, and it's, you know, bioavailable for your body. So, um, what has came up for me, veganism, carnivore, those are like a lot of like trending diets right now. Uh, I still feel, with the diet, it's very contextual to the times. Like I still feel like there's a lot of gaps that might need to be filled in terms of context. Like you were saying, Graham, earlier there about like the animal sacrifice. Like that was part of the context of the time. And I'm feeling like I feel like the big message for me is actually and has been about stewardship, because in the Bible they lived with these animals as well. There's verses about goat's milk, even fish as well. So I've been exploring and noticing what I feel for myself right now, but I was like I'll give the Jesus diet a little try for a bit. So, and you've had experience with like veganism and
Yeah,
whatnot too,
I've done the vegan thing. I kind of fall into where I explore a lot of what Anthony William and the medical medium guy talks about. Um, I've resonated the most with his approach, and I've noticed the biggest difference when following a lot of his stuff. Celery juice, his heavy metal detox smoothie, eating a lot of potatoes and yams, sweet potatoes, uh, just the recipes and the things that he has in his books. I have I have developed a deeper appreciation for the natural foods. One of the ones recently, I got his latest book, the revised edition of Life Changing Foods, and in that one he talks about green peas. I hated green peas as a kid. I hated them. I hated them. I hated them. They were mushy. They were gross. They just tasted awful. But in the book, he talks about green peas being great for hair, for your hair follicles and stuff. You start losing hair, green peas are a great way to stimulate and grow the hair follicles. And a lot of the foods that he talks about in this book, you look at the food and then you look at what it does for the body, and you're like, there's a design that's very similar here. Avocados are great for women's breasts. They look like a breast, right? Like
right?
walnuts. Walnuts are great for the brain. They look like a brain, like you know.
Yeah.
So I've 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 adopted, or I've sort of resonated with that sort of approach to food, is a deep respect and reverence, like reverence, like you said about like with animals and the relationship that we have with them. Um, but also with the plants and the fruits and the vegetables that we eat as well, to know and appreciate their origins, where they come from, and what they're doing for the body. I think the more awareness you bring into what you're eating and how you're eating it, what it's doing for your body, the better it's going to be for you. I can't see a downside to bringing more awareness and appreciation for whether it be dairy or meat or plants, fruit, whatever. Um, but yeah, I've done the vegan thing for a bit. I found it made me feel really light and lots of energy. But like you said, the meat grounded me. The meat gave me like a sort of a very like it grounded me. I don't know how else to put it. Like it connected me to the earth. Like when
Yeah.
Yvonne, the first time I went on that hunt with Yvonne at the Saskatoon farm, and we got that deer, and he, took the deer, put it in the back of the cart, brought it up to the shop, and got it ready, and we cooked some, and I ate it. And the first bite that I had, I immediately felt connected to the land in a way that I've never felt before. Like I
Yeah.
felt the history of that animal. I felt it's like it was the weirdest thing, man. I don't know how to explain it, but it was mystical. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so different than eating meat from a grocery store. Like
Ah.
it wasn't there wasn't like a bloodthirstiness about it, like, yeah, I'm eating like fresh meat, like, rah, like it was sacred, and it was very beautiful, and it made me appreciate the animal that gave its life. for me, and so that I could be nourished. But
Yeah.
all that to be said, I'm curious to, see how you go with this Jesus diet, how long it works for you, and what you notice in your body. I haven't had Kip on my podcast, but um, one of his marketing teams or publicists reached out to say, do you want to interview him about his document of the Christspiracy? And I haven't
Oh,
yet because I've been moving all over the place. But, this is a conversation I want to have with him about this topic because he's very adamant about this idea that human beings shouldn't be eating meat, and that his sort of like really um, potent catchphrase is, "How would Jesus kill an animal?" And he goes around in the documentary asking priests and different people, "How would Jesus kill an animal?" And they're like, "Well, and so it's a really tense question, like people that are Christian, that follow Yeshua, that follow Jesus, and love him, but they still eat meat. And so he kind of poses this question, like, well, explain to me how Jesus would do it, because if you're going to eat meat, and you wanted, what would Jesus do, type of thing with the, like the bracelets. What would Jesus
right.
do in this circumstance, right? That's his sort of argument that he explores in the documentary, which I think is a worthy journey to explore.
Yeah,
um, Anyways, I'm kind of on a rant right now, but
I love it.
um, this is kind of in the context of the Jesus diet. So, how do you see that in terms of your faith and your spiritual path, your following of Jesus and his teachings, Yeshua? How would
Yeah.
you answer that question, or do you see a discrepancy there between your faith and also eating animals?
Yeah. Well, I was listening to like the first part of his podcast. There's like a 3-part series. Aaron Apke, they're on the Jesus Way diet, and yeah, like a lot of like what he was also talking about was like having like the fresh fruits and like the fresh vegetables and everything. And being here in Canada, I'm like, we don't have that. Like that
Good
maybe comes
luck.
around, yeah, every now and then, Um, and so like obviously like I love that. If I was somewhere tropical, I bet you my body would be wanting those fresh fruits and like the fresh vegetables and everything, and it would be like thriving with that. And so, I think he does raise a valid point about that of like, yeah, like how would Jesus kill an animal? Um, and, I'm still reconciling it. I feel like with what you talked about with like your experience with Yvonne, what I've heard from like indigenous around here as well. Um, I feel like, a lot of the indigenous reading that I've read about like the Blackfoot around here is like they had like such a reverence for like the buffalo, the bison, and like used every part of it. And like there was some kind of relationship there, where they would say like sometimes even in like an animal would come up to them and like it would be like an offering. They would be offering themselves, you know. And similarly, if we get like metaphorical about it, like essentially like Jesus also offered himself as well, on the cross. Um, but for me, like a lot of what comes up and like what makes the most sense for me is the idea of stewardship and living in relationship with. So when you look at stuff like, butter, goat's milk, which they talk about in the Bible, those kind of things are like offerings from the animal as well that I feel like I've thrived on that diet where it's like, yeah, eat, like the yogurt and everything like that. You're not killing an animal, but you're in good relationship with it. And similar with like the bees, uh, our buddy Austin there was telling us about a guy that did like a vegan diet and he thrived off of just spirulina and bee pollen, and he was like shredded. So, I've thrived off of like those kind of diets and not necessarily like having to have meat, but I think it's still something that I'm learning to reconcile, because being up north here, I'm still feeling like my body is not at the same kind of energy levels that it has, when I'm not eating meat in
Mhm.
this climate, at least. So that's
Yeah.
been something to reconcile for sure. But I think there's an aspect of, yeah, relationship, and then also of like the new covenant that also happened in the Bible as well. Like after Moses when they did the animal sacrifices and whatnot. So I think I have a lot more to learn, and
Same here.
will like
Yeah.
have to listen to more of the podcast, and yeah, tune in more as well to through like prayer. But
Well, that yeah, and I appreciate you saying that because that's kind of how I see it. Like you can argue intellectually, or debating scripture, what he said, she said. Like this is what he meant. This is what the original word meant, and it can be
yeah,
helpful. But neither of us were there. None of us were there, and
yeah,
things get lost in translation or edited out. There's lots of things that have been removed, changed. So it's like hard to know, and that's why, like I was saying earlier on a different live stream, preparing for this one, letting people know, I said, it's like for me, I'm not a biblical scholar. I don't know any of these things. I can't debate that. It's interesting. And I love watching Aaron and other people talk about these things. Like, okay, cool. Like, what is this? But ultimately, I kind of go back to like, how does this fit within me? Like, how does it resonate? And also,
yeah,
am I being ignorant or ignoring something because it's uncomfortable? Like, do I not want to look at this because I don't want to see the potential that I'm wrong? Like that to
right,
me is an alarm bell. Like, okay, I gotta look into this. It's not just like, oh, I don't like it because it doesn't feel good to me, and I don't want to look at that because it makes me feel uncomfortable. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is like, I resonate with it. I can feel it, and it's like from a place of deep honesty. Like, okay, what's actually going on here? And
yeah,
it, I think we've talked about this before, and I talked about this with Yvonne on his podcast, and also recently with Kara Daniels on her podcast, where she's an animal communicator. Um, to me, from my experiences in life, everything has this beautiful love from God. It's all created from the divine source. And when we're eating a plant, someone might say, well, a plant isn't alive the same way an animal is. From my experience, years ago when I was in a float tank and I merged back with the love that connects everything and everyone, we're all made of this love. And
yeah,
so to me, it's all a level of presence and consciousness and awareness that comes from God that exists in everything and everyone. And when we're eating a plant, a piece of fruit or some dairy or, an animal, it all has that essence in it. And so I think the same way, we would pick an apple from a tree with respect and like a thank you to this tree for providing
yeah,
this fruit that I get to eat. That's how I see it when it comes to eating meat and dairy as well. Is like, thank you to this. And if I take it for granted, if I'm disconnected from it, yeah, there's problems. And that's where big industry and agriculture and factory farming come in, and they abuse these systems because people don't appreciate it. They don't check into where it's from. They're
yeah,
not thankful for it. They'll eat anything. And so you're going to have that level of unconsciousness from the majority of people that permeate into the industries that go, well, people don't really care. So we'll just pump out this cheap meat. We don't care about the animals because the people that are buying them don't care about the animals. So that to me is where the evil is, or where the unconsciousness lies, is our lack of appreciation. And that can exist for fruit, and
yeah,
almonds. How many
yeah,
acres of land for almond trees do they have to kill all the animals and the rodents
yeah,
and the things to grow these almond trees? No one talks about that, you know?
exactly.
So there's
Yeah,
like, it's not one or the other. I think to me, it's like a level of appreciation and consciousness and presence with the, the consumption, any consumption, food being,
yeah,
like you said, a majority of our time is focused on eating. So, bringing the presence there to either do a fast or just to have more appreciation for the food that you eat. Um,
yes.
yeah. So
Oh,
anyways,
that is quite a bit. Yeah, and I mean, we even have Karen in the comments, saying without bison and Saskatoon berries, our indigenous peoples would not have survived as the glaciers were receding. There's even like the Inuit, like way up north. Like what are they eating in the the igloos? Like they're hunting as well. So yeah, there's so much nuance to it. I think, like you're mentioning, and the biggest thing is just bringing it back to that conscious awareness and yeah, unveiling in a culture those places where we don't have that reverence, because that I think is exactly what you're saying, like where the problem in lies.
yeah. Tyrone, could you, just because we're getting a bit of echo with the phone on the table like that, could you pick it up?
Yeah.
Because the speaker is echoing off the table and going into the microphone. People are saying,
Okay.
like, ah. How's that, guys? Does that sound better? Hopefully it does. Thank you, Danny, for your comment. Interesting discussion, Graham and Tyrone. You've motivated me to search the Bible tomorrow morning during my daily read of scriptures. Thank you. Awesome, Danny. Great to hear it. Um, Yeah, so if you guys have any questions on the topics that we've covered so far, drop them in the comments. Tyrone and I can take some time now to answer those questions. Everyone's saying the sound is much better now. That's great. Karen says, fascinating conversation. She has to run though. Thank you. Karen, thanks for being here. Um, and Larissa says we need to be thankful and appreciate everything. Who's the cat there, Tyrone?
His name is Arnold.
Arnold.
Yeah, I call him the sleep burglar because he keeps me up at night.
Ay, ay, ay. Yeah, dude. I think in closing of our conversation, thank you for hopping on here and doing this with me. I love our conversations. The awareness of our consumption, the awareness of our rebellious nature, and also our obedience to God's plan. I think this all kind of revolves around this idea of being honest and present with ourselves through our interactions, through our consumption, through our actions, through our resistance or rebellious nature, through our servitude and obedience to what we feel called to do. Is like, to me, the common theme is getting to a clearer place of presence and awareness with ourselves and our lives and our actions, that is going to bring us the most benefit and also the most like love and benefit to others as well. Uh, so
Yeah.
thank you for a wonderful conversation, Tyrell. It's been
Oh,
great.
well, thank you, brother, for initiating it there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
I mean, yeah, I feel it's something that we can bring light to nowadays, especially with the pull on our soul so much, and just really just getting quiet. And when we collectively all are in resonance with that obedience to God, to our soul, like it makes waves that we can't even see. So thank you
Amen,
for
dude. Yeah,
initiating.
man. Yeah, dude. And that is really how like all the wise teachers that have come before have mentioned or said this statement of like, you change, you focus on your life, listening and changing your world, and that it ripples out. A lot of people try to change the world, but it's like you got to change yourself. You got to make your own bed, as Jordan Peterson would say. You got to take care of, your inner world first.
That's right.
Otherwise, you're building a house on a foundation that's not solid, and you know, it collapses.
Yes.
Collapses. Yeah.
Amen. Yeah.
Um, well, thanks, dude. I think the
Yeah.
only other, I mean, the anything. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Then I have some updates for people to share. But anything else you want to share about you, things you have coming up, breath work or tantra or Substack, anything that you want to give a highlight to that you're working on that you want to share with people before we wrap up here.
Yeah, I see, some familiar people from Substack, and just want to thank people, for their presence on there. I know I haven't been very active on Substack. Really had like a time of like deep introspection and integration with like being in Italy there for a long time, and just the way that life is kind of shuffled around. And so I am looking forward to sharing more on Substack in terms of that. And yeah, I've just launched my health coaching as well. I completed a holistic health practitioner certification, and I'm working through another program right now called the Primal Health Blueprint. Um, so, yeah, a lot of that is about like activating those genes that we have within us to really bring more love and light into our life. So that's offering that people can stay tuned for. And one that I'm feeling creative about, that I'm playing with the idea of, people might see it on Substack, but it's prayers with some music that I make, and just having like some nice like scripture reading and also like inspirational reading that people can listen to like as they're going to bed. I'm someone who, like, when I go to bed, I like sometimes will toss on like those affirmations, or even just like a kind of like little prayer session. And so I want to create something like that where, people can wind down for the night in a good state, and, just have like that playing as they fall asleep, something to bring some more light. So can stay tuned for that. That's kind of my fun, creative thing that
I
I'm gonna
love that,
go.
bro. I love that, dude. That's
Yeah.
yeah. So you're gonna post that on Substack, or where are you gonna share those
I think on YouTube, I wanna make
on
it,
YouTube?
accessible to everybody, but it'll be
Yeah,
on Substack as well, so
too.
maybe we could collab in one there. That would be cool,
Yeah,
so
bro. I would love to. That's fantastic, man. I love that. Tyrone and I have done. I think we've mentioned this before, but Tyrone has shared his beats with me many times, and I get so amped up. And then he's like, "The song's not done yet." And then I get mad at him, like, "Just finish the song so I can enjoy the full thing." Because he'll play these like little small segments that I love. So I'm looking forward to the full track.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll come through.
Awesome. Awesome, dude. So just for everybody else watching, for my updates, we have our writers challenge on March 3rd, which is The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. I know many of you have already signed up. You're registered. Tyrone, obviously, you're welcome to join. It's a 12-week program. It's 3 pages of stream of consciousness writing. You go on an artist date. I know we talked about that already. You're like, I want to try that, do an artist
Yeah.
date. So, yeah, you're welcome to join. Everybody watching is welcome to join. It's free. You can get the book from your library. You don't have to pay for the book if you can't afford it. If you want to do the free, join us as a free subscriber. You just have to find a couple other people to do the challenge with you, to do the journey with you. On Zoom, it's for paying subscribers, and it'll be you and 3 other people. You'll form your groups of 4, so you can meet every week and discuss the exercises and go through that. So I'm looking forward to that. March 3rd, March 8th is when we do our finding our groups. So make sure you have the book by March 3rd. And those are my updates. Thanks everybody for watching. It's great conversation, Tyrone. Thanks for taking the time, man. And enjoy George Canyon's cabin. The cabin.
Thanks, buddy.
Yeah.
That would be
Awesome, bro.
amazing.
Awesome, man. Thank you again, and we'll see you guys all next time. Peace.
See y'all.